Ja. Guten Abend, meine Damen und Herren. Wir werden natürlich Deutsch den ganzen Abend sprechen. I'm only joking. We will speak English, and so will Nicolaus Fest, who is our distinguished guest today, coming from the European Parliament, to speak to us today about the state of affairs in Germany, especially about freedom of speech in Germany. In the last months, we've experienced a debate in Germany about whether the leading opposition party should be banned by the Constitutional Court and by the Internal and Secret Service. And this idea has been endorsed and reported by Danish public media and also by politicians from all political parties in Germany and from state-funded media in Germany. So of course we've invited Fest as a representative of the German public to enlighten us on this, but I would suggest to you that this democratic crisis, as Germany seems to be in, is perhaps a wider problem, not just encompassing the problems of the Alternative for Deutschland. But Nicolaus will entertain you much more about this. Nicolaus Fest will give his speech, then we have a break.
Approximately 15 minutes.
Approximately 15 minutes. And after the break, you will have an opportunity to ask Nicolaus questions or comments or whatever you wish. Is that?
Yeah. We end the event at 9:30.
We'll see. We were joking that
really?
Marxist groups in Germany, when they had discussing evenings, they would continue debating capital logic until 3 in the morning. But I don't think we will do that this time. So please give a warm welcome to
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I think this is, although we all know that not everyone is happy with everything that happens in Denmark, I must say you are a happy country because other countries might suffer from global warming. I have today realized you are not, a city, or Copenhagen is not a city that suffers from global warming, actually from global freezing. And but it is a lovely city, and as I already told, I have spent many holidays of my youth in Denmark, so I'm a bit ashamed that I didn't pick up any Danish word. I can't remember, but so I have to do with English today. I just want to introduce, or probably a few words about my background. I was born and raised in Hamburg, one of the most northern, bigger cities in Germany, and so we have. I think if you come from this city, you always have good relation, or you always have an eye for the Scandinavian people and for Britain, and so and as I said, my parents took us quite often to Denmark on holidays, and as I took my kids to Denmark, you can see that I really have a love for this country. My education, I'm a lawyer, but never worked in this profession because, after having studied, and then after the studies we have some kind of we have 2.5 years of practice time in Germany, and after that I decided that my love rather goes to journalism, and so I worked in journalism for many years. The last 15 years for Axel Springer. Axel Springer is the publisher of BILD, and I was for 10 years on the editorial board of BILD, and then for the last 2 or 3 years, 2.5 years, I was a member of, or was deputy editor-in-chief of BILD am Sonntag, the Sunday issue, which in those days had a circulation of 2.7 million copies per Sunday. So it was by far the biggest and most influential Sunday paper in Germany. Then in 2014, I wrote an opinion piece on Islam, saying that it was in those days that we had demonstrations that are very similar to the demonstrations we had in almost all European cities and in Copenhagen as well after the 7th of October last year, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas demonstrations. And we had these, they were shouting things like Hamas, Hamas, Juden into the gas, and other things. And I wrote an opinion piece that, I have difficulties with a lot of aspects of Muslim migration to Europe. One, for instance, is how they treat women. The other thing is that they are not willing to do in Rome as the Romans do. And I had an especially big problem with their relationship or with their or how they looked at Jews. And this was, I might remember you, these were the beginnings of the war in Syria. And so hundreds of thousands of people were coming from Syria, were coming to Europe. And so I wrote on this opinion piece, before accepting migrants with a Muslim background who have now shown for several years in almost all European countries, be it Sweden, be it the Netherlands, be it Belgium, be it Britain, and so on, that they are not really willing to accept the rules of the European countries. We should probably first let in, or if we take refugees from Syria, we should pick the Christian refugees, the Jewish refugees, the refugees who don't believe in any God, and so on and so on. And so you can still find this article on the web, and reading it from today's perspective, you will ask yourself, what the fuss about? What's it all about? I mean, please read it. I read it again the day before yesterday, and thought, okay, this caused such an uproar, unbelievable. But it did, and within a few days, it was quite fun. It was, of course, BILD am Sonntag is published on a Sunday, and when I woke up, I always wake up pretty early. So when I woke up, it was something like 5:30 or so. It was a beautiful day. It was July, and so I got my race bike, and I turned on my phone and saw something like 700 Twitter as tweets, and looked at it, and mostly were very unfriendly. Most of them were very unfriendly, and but I said, yeah, well, what the heck, okay, I go on a biking trip. And three hours later, I came back, took a shower and so, and then I turned on my mobile again, and 27,000 tweets, plus 15 calls from my editor-in-chief. Yeah? Please call. The telephone system at Springer, is going down because they received so many calls, and we had to increase security and so on and so on. So, and then I knew, okay, that might be a bit problematic, because it really now depends how willing the publishing group Axel Springer is in defending my right to express my opinion on migration. And what happened was that so I tried to reach the CEO of Springer, Matthias Döpfner, but he vanished. He went into hiding, and I left several messages on his mobile phone to give me a ring. I'm still waiting for this call, even after almost 10 years. He hasn't ever returned this call. So, that was a clear indication that life might become a bit tricky. Then suddenly, my editor-in-chief, she is today editor-in-chief of BILD, Marion Horn. Although she has welcomed and praised actually my opinion piece, and I mean, I had written to her, which saved my life later. It might cause some problem, but are you tough enough, to stand by it? And she said, yeah, of course I am. Yeah, it's a brilliant opinion piece. We will publish it. Then suddenly she said, so yeah, probably it wasn't such a good idea, and yeah, you should have thought twice. Not I shouldn't have, published it, but you, Nicholas, should have thought twice about writing this piece about Islam. So these were clear indications that life might get a bit tricky. So at night I thought, okay, probably it is wise to go back to the headquarter of BILD and to have a printout of this email answer. No, of course I will stand by it, it's a brilliant piece. So I thought that might later help, if I got it. And I got it, and everything was okay. So what happened then was that almost all the other papers, especially the leftist paper like Die Zeit, der Spiegel, der Tagesspiegel, die Süddeutsche, and so on, they all wrote about this infamous article by Nicolaus Fest, and so on, of course supported by the Protestant Church, the unions, the Catholic Church, I think all other churches as well, and so on. And of course by the public broadcasters ARD and ZDF. They also, joined the club of damnation. Never talk to Nicolaus Fest again. And that was it. Within Axel Springer, it had the effect that no one was talking to me anymore. No one. Whenever I showed up somewhere, everyone turned around and said, pretended not to see me. And that is, let's say, you got to know the side of people which you don't like to get to know. So it wasn't the most entertaining thing. There were some advantages. 2 or 3 weeks later, there was a so-called management meeting, and as I was one of the managers, deputy editor-in-chief, I was also invited, and for the first time, whenever I was hungry, I could go through the crowd of hungry people like Moses, in the Red Sea, because whenever they saw me, everyone was, saying, and the cloud of doom was hovering above my head. Everyone knew, don't talk to this guy again because, he is fish food. So in the end, it was the other nice aspect is if you have worked for quite some years for such a publishing house in a rather high position, and if they don't really have any reason to fire you, and especially if you have received a letter from the editor-in-chief, that welcomes this opinion piece, then of course, let's say the severance pay is fair, and that gives you some time to survive, and especially it helps you to be more financially independent. And I can only say, whenever you want to join a political party, financial independence and intellectual independence as well, but financial independence is the very base, I think, of good political work, because if you're not independent, you are, especially from your own party, you are, a puppet that can always be pushed around by your party leaders. So, but that's so much for the introduction. Something about, probably, you might know that my father, some people here already know, he was a historian. I don't want to praise him now, but I think his book on Hitler is still the best biography on Hitler so far, much better as Kershaw and so. And although it is now more than 50 years old, I think published in 1973. And he was also, I decided to become a journalist. He was a journalist. He was one of the editors-in-chief of Frankfurter Allgemeine. And I somehow followed his steps, although I never wanted to, but then I realized that, my love, I love journalism, and so although I would have preferred not to compete directly with my father, somehow I ended up like this. So much for the introduction, but what you should realize is that freedom of speech has, for me, is not only a thing to talk about, but has a real personal meaning, but because I experienced how it is like when freedom of speech is suddenly questioned, and that is actually exactly what I had on the 2 days after the article was published. I had a discussion about this with my editor-in-chief, Marion Horn, and I said, Marion, it is not today. It is not any longer about what my critics claimed, that there were wrong facts. All the facts were actually correct, but some claimed, and I said it has nothing to do with the question whether this is whether all the nitty details are correct or not. Today we have a much bigger issue here. It's about freedom of speech. Do you support the freedom? It is an opinion piece. It is not a scientific work. It's an opinion piece. Is Axel Springer, are you willing to defend freedom of speech? And now, let me tell you another thing. When we are talking here, you get a lot of money. And every editor-in-chief should. Because, but you don't get the money because you are, you make a brilliant paper, or because you know more than other journalists here in the house know. You get this money also for defending freedom of speech. And now, in this very moment, now it's time to live up to your promise to defend freedom of speech of all journalists here in this house and in Germany. And if you're not willing to do this, then step down. Then you're not fit for this job. But now it's not about creating a paper, a good paper or whatever, or finding interesting headlines or so. Today it's what journalism or what your job is really about. Defending the freedom of speech of, all your colleagues here. She decided otherwise. So what is the status of freedom of expression in Germany today? Here I have a few numbers. That is the reason why I have to now look at these pages here. The first address among pollsters is the Allensbach Institute in Germany. Allensbach is, one of the biggest polling institutes in Germany, and by sure the most renowned one. In end of last year, 2023, Allensbach asked Germans how they felt about freedom of expression in Germany. The result, only 40% of Germans believed that people can express their opinion freely. 40% is the lowest figure since the founding of the Federal Republic of Germany. The majority of Germans, almost 60%, expect economic or professional disadvantages or social exclusion if they express their opinion freely and if they speak up about what they really think. In 1990, so 30 years ago, only 20% of Germans were afraid of speaking up freely. In those days, 20%, now 60%. So it's an increase by 40%. You see, the years of governance by our all-beloved Chancellor Angela Merkel, were problematic in many ways, but they were especially problematic when it comes to the freedom of, or the subjective freedom of speech. Interesting fact here, according to Allensbach, the older the respondents, the more skeptical they were. Outright happy with the situation of the freedom of speech in Germany were two groups, that is funny too. Academics with a preference to either the Greens or the Social Democrats. All other, who were, let's say, rather in favor of the Christian Democrats, the liberals, I don't want to talk about AfD, they were very skeptical. And of course, the younger the respondents were, the more positive they were about the current situation of the freedom of speech in Germany. 2 years before that, before 2023, in a study from 2021, Allensbach had also asked about the topics, the issues, the Germans feared most to discuss in public. And these were the following: migration, number 1. Islam, number 2. These are the issues they feared most to speak freely about. Migration, Islam, patriotism, equal rights. Equal rights is probably not means discrimination of men, in comparison to women. Third Reich, of course, a very slippery territory. And, not surprisingly, Alternative für Deutschland. These were the ultimate taboo topics of which Germans did not dare to speak freely and publicly. And that with good reason. I wonder whether you have some of you follow the German papers. I tried to find reports on that issue in Danish papers, but I couldn't find anything, but not even Google Translator helped me. So, last week, and that is at the moment the big thing, the big message or thing in Germany. Last week, a 16-year-old schoolgirl was taken out of a classroom like a felon by 3 police officers and escorted through the school in front of all classmates. She was escorted outside the school. There, in a police car, she was given a so-called warning that is usually used for people on the brink of joining ISIS or Al-Qaeda and so on. What was her crime? She had shared slightly, probably more than slightly, silly video that my party had shared on Facebook, showing the famous Belgian comic characters, the Smurfs. You might know them. The Smurfs? Okay. The Smurfs are blue, and the party color of AfD is blue as well. And so this meme, as one says, these AfD meme said, not only the Belgian Smurfs or the Smurfs are blue, but Germany is becoming ever bluer every day. So she had posted this and added to the post, I love my country, meine Heimat. Ich liebe meine Heimat. I love my country. Country is probably not my fatherland or something. I love my fatherland, and I don't regard it as a settlement room or settlement space. That was all she did. And yeah, so something is wrong. Okay. No. So, yeah, so the parents were not informed, the parents of this girl. You know? And of course, when they heard about this, you know, they were, you know, they made this public. And immediately, I mean, of course, my party said, hey, are you completely crazy? Giving a warning to a 16-year-old, what has she done? I mean, she has not committed any crime. She has simply expressed her opinion. And the person who had snitched on her was the headmaster of the school.
Boy.
I mean, you can't make it up. You can't make it up. It's unbelievable. And so she got, a visit by the police, and then it was, let's put it this way, what you expect to happen didn't happen. I mean, I had expected that the police plus the interior minister of the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern immediately said, oh, we are sorry, this was, out of proportion, and so on and so on. No! The police said, we have to fight crime even before it is committed. And the interior minister of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, a social democrat, says, it wasn't probably the best solution, but in the end, no harm was done. She wasn't even handcuffed. I mean, handcuffed for putting, first of all, of course, you have to ask, why is the police, following the Facebook accounts of a 16-year-old girl? Okay, it was probably the headmaster, but why, when the headmaster called the police, why didn't the police say, hey, sorry, so what is the crime? What is the offense? We can't see anything, and everyone has the right of freedom of speech. So why should we, come and act here? But obviously they didn't. It is, an extremely absurd and blatant case, but it's just one of many, many, many. In the days of Corona, police forces executed several night raids, of houses of doctors who had criticized the lockdown measures of the government Merkel. The same thing happened to judges who refused to punish citizens who violated governmental lockdown measures. For instance, I'll give you some examples for these lockdown measures. For instance, walking at night in a park without wearing a face mask. That was considered an offense. Same was also an offense was considered if you were going on a fishing trip in a rowing boat all by yourself, on a Bavarian lake. I think they were afraid that you could probably somehow do harm to the fish, and so fish corona is a very dangerous thing. Third thing is doing trail running in the most remote forests at night, or during the day. But this was forbidden as well, without face mask, of course. If you were wearing a face mask, then it was all fine. And of course, if couples, married couples, non-married couples, kissed in public, that, of course, was, let's say, a capital offense. And so some judges decided No, this is clearly unconstitutional. This is clearly totally out of proportion, and we are not going to sanction anyone who has, let's say, trespassed these absurd rules. And the state's answer to these in obedience of allegedly independent judges were visits by police squads at 4 a.m, including confiscation of mobile phones and searching the children's rooms. Unbelievable. I mean, And of course, and all these measures were always carried out in a way that it was made sure that all neighbors knew about. As Mao Zedong once said, punish one, educate 100. All of this is in line, all of these measures are actually in line with the now Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser. Nancy Faeser is Federal Interior Minister. Nancy Faeser is a member of the Social Democrats, but in fact, I don't need that. But in fact, she is I think she is a Trotskyist or communist or whatever she is, her home base is the state of Hessen, Frankfurt, and so on. And the Social Democrats in the state of Hessen have always been considered the most radical and left-leaning Social Democrats of all Social Democrats in Germany. And within this already very left-leaning, extremist, radical Social Democratic Party in Hessen, Nancy Faeser was a left-winger, an extreme left-winger. So, it's really hard to tell what differentiates her from from Die Linke or other former GDR party members. And just 3 months or 4 months before she was elected, or she was appointed Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser wrote an opinion piece for a very small, tiny, not really known magazine in Germany. And what is the title and who is behind this magazine? The title of the magazine is Antifa, and it is published by a group that is actually observed by the Domestic Intelligence Service of Germany. And by appointing her to becoming our Federal Interior Minister, Nancy Faeser became chief of this Domestic Intelligence Service, who actually observed, a magazine she found fit to publish an article in. I mean, you can't make it up. You can't really make it up. It's like, asking the dog to watch, the provision of sausages. And that is exactly the same. It's totally crazy. Nancy Faeser is committed to the fight against right-wing extremism. In fact, she fights everything that is not deliberately or decidedly left-wing. To do this, she is constantly inventing new laws that subsidize left-extreme NGOs with taxpayers' money. And she is also using the Domestic Intelligence Service not only against AfD, but also against everything that sounds or smells right. Not right extreme, not radical right, but just right. The intelligence service, the Domestic Intelligence Service, had already walked into a very slippery territory under Angela Merkel. She put Thomas Haldenwang in charge. In his student days, as far as I know, and I've read, and he has never contradicted this allegation. In his student days, a convinced communist. So we have Nancy Faeser, a convinced communist or very left-leaning, I think left-extreme social democrat. And she is the chief of someone who in his student days was a convinced, or said to have been a convinced communist. Shortly after being appointed, Mr. Haldenwang invented a new field of activity for the domestic intelligence service. And this was fighting delegitimization of the government, which is, I mean, you can't make it up. That means, in other words, anyone who is critical to measures invented and carried out by the government, be it COVID things, and Haldenwang is saying this, people who are critical towards or against the COVID measures, might have a right extreme background. So that's, if you're critical against because of against lockdown measures, then you, or if you are critical of lockdown measures, then you are likely to be observed by our domestic intelligence service. Same goes if you are critical of the Green Deal, of the EU, of migration, and so on. So, and everyone who considers our wonderful government stupid, corrupt, you all know that if you talk about ministers or politicians in general, a lot of people might not use the most nicest terms, And so if, whoever speaks of our Minister for Economics, Mr. Habeck, or our Foreign Minister Baerbock, or so, in probably not the nicest terms, might now be a subject of interrogation or investigation by our domestic intelligence service because he is making fun of the government. That is actually what they really I hate these. Yeah, and this is exactly what the intelligence service is now all about. It's not about protecting the Constitution. That is actually the name. It's called Bundesamt für Verfassungsschutz, so protecting the Constitution. Today, it is not about protecting the Constitution. That is, I don't want to criticize this. Of course, we have to protect our constitutions, for example, against Islamic threats. But on this eye, our intelligence service is totally blind. They don't want to see this. But today it's only to protect the government from being criticized by the people. Ms. Faeser, for instance, made this abundantly clear in a recent press conference, and this press conference is really recent. It was on the 13th of February. And she said, anyone who mocks the state or the members of the government must be dealing with a strong state. The newspaper, our paper Die Welt, commented on the statement. I've written it down. You can mock the state, you have the constitutional right to do so, and the fact that you have to write something like this in 2024 borders on clear madness. True, but it is madness with a totalitarian method. And yet no one called Faeser to step down immediately. How such announcements by Nancy Faeser, by the Federal Interior Minister, work could be seen 2 days later in another press conference, after the press conference. A citizen who had donated several hundred euros to Alternative für Deutschland received a letter by its bank. The letter said, you shouldn't do this again. You shouldn't donate money to the Alternative für Deutschland. Otherwise, we will cancel your accounts. The guy made this public. I don't know whether this was the intention actually of this letter, because, as I said, punish 1, educate 100. And of course, immediately the bank said, oh no, this was a mistake by some sub company. We didn't mean it that way, sure. Yeah? But how trustworthy is this? I myself experienced this twice. Deutsche Bank and Deutsche Kreditbank both, said we don't want your accounts anymore. We don't want to have any business relationship with you, because, of course, they didn't say because you're a member of AfD. But I had my accounts there for 10, 12 years or so, and out of the blue, and I'm not the poorest man here, probably among the customers of Deutsche Bank. So there were absolutely no reason why they should cancel the contract, but they did, and same did Deutsche Kreditbank. So, and same happened to many of my fellow party members. So this is actually a rather common procedure in Germany at the time being. On the very same day, Interior Minister Faeser gave her press conference. Her colleague, Family Minister Lisa Paus, also gave a press conference, both on the 13th of February. Lisa Paus is a member of the Greens and lives in the same district in Berlin where I used to live. And so when I was running for Bundestag in 2017, we very often met at podium discussions and talking to potential voters and so on and so on. And even at the risk of now mocking or delegitimizing the government, I must say normally creatures with the intellectual capacity of Lisa Paus have more than 2 legs. But unbelievable. Talking to her was really a nightmare. Now she is family minister, and she said in her conference, we want to combat hate speech even if remarks are not within the limits of criminal liability. So even if they are not within the limits of criminal liability. You can't make it up. It's so absurd. And it's everything is on open stage. Even leftist media were appalled by these words. One wrote, it is nothing short of spectacular when a minister announces that she will take action against statements that are clearly protected by the fundamental right of freedom of expression. Correct, yeah? But did this have any consequences for Lisa Paus? Certainly not. There are dozens of such statements and examples. The aforementioned Thomas Haldenwang, head of the Domestic Intelligence Service, has expressed almost the same ideas as Minister Paus. He recently said, although some criticism has no criminal relevance, it still endangers the reputation of the state and the government, and we got to do something about this. In any functioning democracy, Mr. Haldenwang would have been fired immediately. In Germany, he is allowed to carry on as if nothing has happened. And another and the last example of how Mr. Haldenwang is seeing his job. At the beginning of 2024, Mr. Haldenwang publicly, as 3 months ago, publicly stated in a press conference, listen, it cannot be the sole responsibility of the Domestic Intelligence Service to keep down Alternative für Deutschland. You can't believe it. It's not the main role and the main task. It's none of their business to keep the second biggest opposition party down. Can you imagine? The intelligence service of Germany says one of our main goals is to keep the opposition party, down in the polls and, in the elections. What happened? Of course, nothing happened. But as I said, the domestic secret service openly admits that he is trying to negatively influence the polling results or the results of elections and of the second largest opposition party, and that the other parties should help him doing so, and nothing happens. It is not without very good reason that last week, I think on Tuesday, even the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, the leading Swiss newspaper, and really far, far, far from being a supporter of any radical opinion. This is all very clear, well-reasoned, and so on. Even Neue Zürcher Zeitung called for the German domestic intelligence service to be disbanded immediately. According to the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, the authoritarian temptation for the traffic light government to use it against the opposition was simply too big. Even the Neue Zürcher Zeitung now says the domestic German intelligence service has become a threat to democracy, and because it is clear that the traffic light coalition is politicizing and using it against the opposition, and therefore the intelligence service should be dissolved immediately. And this is not a radical paper. This is the Neue Zürcher Zeitung. Germany has fallen in a den of thugs, or correctly, under the rule of a totalitarian, red-painted fascist government. I must say it that way. I'm 61 years old, and I grew up with the images, at least when I was 10, 15, of the SAVAK, the intelligence service of the Shah of Persia, how those thugs beat up, protesters. And of course, I grew up with how the Turkish military government took no less brutal actions against critics, or how the military junta in Argentina used mounted troops against demonstrators, and how dissidents were persecuted in the states of Czechoslovakia, of the GDR, of Poland, and Yugoslavia, of course. I could never have imagined that something like this could happen to the Federal Republic. But in 2021, I participated in many demonstrations against the COVID lockdowns. And Alternative für Deutschland, we organized many of these demonstrations and made sure that we followed all the rules that were set up by the police. For instance, you couldn't walk together, but you had to everyone had to stand 2 meters from the others, and of course the police were there with measures to always tell you, okay, this were only 1 meter 98, so 2 centimeters back here. That's totally crazy. It was absurd, but that was rather the funny part of it. And we organized these demonstrations under the slogan for our constitutional rights, for the freedom of expression, for the freedom to assembly, for the freedom of expression, or of profession, because, a lot of people were professionally affected by these lockdowns because they couldn't work, they couldn't earn money. So we fought for the very basic constitutional rights that are protected, or should have been protected, by our constitution and by the government, who should be, the leading, protecting organization for the constitutional rights. And what I saw while walking with my fellow demonstrators reminded me often of images that I had seen in Persia, in Argentina, in Turkey, and in the countries of the East Bloc. Now, mounted police, were used. I mean, they drove their horses in right into the crowd, without giving a damn if someone was hurt or not. Young people, but also, let's say people my age or 50 or so in suits with ties and so, were beaten up by and really a police that didn't know any stop signs. Cyclists were violently bludgeoned off their bikes, and water cannons were used without prior notice. And it was December. It was November, December, January, and so on and so on. A friend of mine, a Jewish lady of 50-something, was tied with, how do you call these things, these plastic thingies? Sorry? Yeah. And was pushed with her face down on the street for 40 minutes in the rain. Some policeman was sitting on her, and after that she said, okay, I now know what the Gestapo was all about. And these were completely peaceful demonstrations. Many of those were organized by Alternative für Deutschland. And of course, we know whenever there are, let's say, if ever there had been some spark of violence, they would have used that for another smear campaign or so against Alternative. So we made sure that nothing like this happens. And if you compare this to the always violent demonstrations of Antifa that always happens, or of the pro-Palestinian guys that we have now seen in all major German cities, and if you see, how carefully how carefully the police acts in this, against these demonstrations, and that they always try to de-escalate, and never use water cannons, and try to stroke the perpetrators into peaceful behavior, But if you compare this to what I have seen, then you really lose your trust not only in the German state, but also in the German judicial system. So, this is the state of freedom at the moment. I don't know whether it's the state of freedom in Germany at the moment, but during lockdown times, it was. And this is, of course, everything aimed at intimidation. But intimidation is not just a job that is carried out by the police. The government has similar methods. It proposes snitching portals nationwide, where you can snitch or rat on your neighbors. In Berlin, under the name of Berliner Register. In Berlin alone, there are well over 100 offices, where you can snitch on your neighbor or on people. And you have a website. They have a website. It's financed by the state, and they on the website they actually push you to snitch, on people who are critical. And they say this. Oh, you can read this. If you Google Berliner Register, you will find the website. They ask you, if someone is critical about LGBTIQ or feminism or migration or Roma, Sinti and all that, then please report him to the Berlin Register. this is in Berlin, but also in North Rhine-Westphalia and in other states. These registers are now set up. They are all these offices are all run by left extreme NGOs, and of course, no one you won't find anything if someone please also report if someone supports Antifa or has a left extreme agenda or something that you won't find there. But it's only if you make allegedly discriminatory remarks about LGBTIQ and gender and all this nonsense. So, if you want to know what happens with all these informations, no one knows. But as in Berlin, for some odd reasons, suddenly the employers of people who were snitched at received letters. Or let's say, the schools and kindergartens, kitas, of those people received letters saying, we only want to inform you that the father of, I don't know, Alexander and Josephine has been reported on to be very critical about the rights of LGBTIQ people or the rights of, I don't know, Roma, Sinti, and so on and so on. So all these letters are anonymous. So there's hardly any means to protect you against this. And if this doesn't work, then you sometimes find stickers in the neighborhood where you're living. Yeah, you find stickers saying this and this. He's an anti-feminist. He is anti-migration. He is probably a xenophobe. Be careful about this. And so, if you want to have an idea of how the freedom of expression at the moment is in Germany, I think that gives you some hints. All these things are paid, I have to stress this again, by the taxpayer. The state of Berlin and the federal government are spending a lot of money for supporting these crazy snitching sites or snitching offices. And I think it's totally unconstitutional. But as for now, no one, the media remain silent and do not report on this. So what we have now, what is the situation? I think it's. I mean, after this 16-year-old girl was not arrested but escorted, a lot of people. I mean, this happened in the former GDR, and of course there was an outcry because now a lot of people feel reminded of the situation in the former GDR, and what Nancy Faeser is doing, but also, I mean, Berlin is now governed by a Christian Democrat. And these Berlin Register and this funding of left extreme groups was, of course, invented by the previous government, a coalition of the communists, the social democrats, and the Greens, which were running Berlin for 16 years or so, running it down the drain. But okay, and now we have for almost 2 years we have government of the Christian Democrats and the Social Democrats, and the mayor is a Christian Democrat. And has he done anything against the Berlin Register? No, he hasn't. So there is no hope that the Christian Democrats will be any better than the Greens or the left. And what a lot of people also wrote when they heard about these cases, that is exactly, we are now really getting ever closer to George Orwell's 1984 and the famous word of thought crime, It's not, a crime does not start, and that's exactly what Heidenlang said. A crime does not start when you really trespass a clearly laid down border, clearly laid down in our penal, register. But before that, when you even think about doing something what is probably not so, not in line with what the government thinks fit. Good. I for myself have decided that 2 years ago, I've decided that I don't want to live in a country where the freedom of speech is not any longer existent, and where you have unleashed a German intelligence service that is totally crazy and that is really thinking in terms of thought crime. And so I left Germany. What finally pulled the trigger was a comparatively simple or light joke by 30 to 40, 50 actors and artists well known in Germany. And they mocked the Merkel government's lockdown measures in short YouTube videos. And the campaign, the name of this campaign was "Close Down Everything." Lockdown measures are not sufficient. Close down everything and stop breathing. So the title was "Close Down Everything." Not only opera houses and cinemas and restaurants and kitas and schools, but really everything. Let's stop living in this country, more or less. And of course, this was very nice because all these YouTube videos were done in a very light, humoresque way. And so they were good because in these gray days of lockdown, the criticism was light, and they also took the lockdown lightly. So it was, a very nice, laughable thing. But even that didn't go well with most of my fellow citizens. Immediately, a shitstorm arose in the left-wing media. Die Zeit asked in a kind of parental advice, was that really necessary? As if criticism of the most severe restrictions of fundamental rights were a childish nuisance. Der Spiegel criticized the subversive nature of these videos. Normally, subversive nature of art is always considered probably one of the pros of art. Here it was one that spoke obviously against it. And the public television, usually a hotspot for the most stupid telenovelas and gender nonsense, went so far as to claim that the video clips were of poor intellectual quality and belonged to the conspiracy theorist camp. Following the public outcry, it really rained down hard on these actors and actresses. Agencies and television stations terminated employment contracts, concerts and film projects were cancelled. In fact, many of the participants were completely banned from working. So the participants retracted their statements, the statements they had made in the clips. They were a mistake, they said. We didn't know what we triggered. We didn't mean it. They underestimated the seriousness of the situation, meaning COVID, and we didn't have all the information necessary. It was like one of these public show trials in the Soviet Union of Stalin, and the great request for forgiveness and readmission into the circle of the good people. When an AfD one of the public broadcasting the broadcasters in Germany, was later asked whether professional bans and economic sanctions were a permissible means in the battle of opinions, he didn't even understand the questions. He said, everyone in Germany has the right to express his opinion, but they always have to live with the consequences. That is like Idi Amin, the bloodthirsty dictator of Uganda, once said, we have the freedom of speech, but I can't guarantee you the freedom after speech. Seeing these show trials, it was at least clear to me, okay, you have to get out, you must go. Antifa had already burned down my car, slashed the tire several times, and I regularly found friendly warnings in my mailbox saying, Fest, we know where you live. But that was just, if you live in a, excuse my language, but in a shithole like Berlin, you get used to that, and you know that no one will help you, not the police and so on, because the government is very closely, or the then government, of communists, social democrats, and Greens, are very closely linked to Antifa. Some of them wear T-shirts in Parliament saying, we are pro-Antifa and so on and so on. So you can imagine how this is. So you get used to this Nazi methods, of burning down your car and paying house visits and so on and so on. But when I realized that not only the police and the government is at the brink of becoming totally totalitarian, but that also the German media and the German society has this absurd lust for oppressing freedom of speech, then I said, okay, bye-bye. At that time, many of my acquaintances and friends laughed at me and said, yeah, we know Fest, he has again one of his usual hysterical fit. Now, no one is laughing anymore. And whoever can, who has, let's say, no kids that are still attending school, who has no parents they have to attend for, so they all are, and who has, of course, the means to do that, they all are looking for a place outside Germany, be it Switzerland, be it Austria, be it Spain, Hungary, wherever. Everyone is trying to move abroad. The conditions in Germany, and now I come to the end, are frightening. Yet in Denmark, they will probably soon be similar. I was a member of Inge Committee in the European Parliament. Inge Committee is primarily concerned with two topics, that is combating disinformation and hate speech, those two. The Inge Committee met for several years, and its results have now been incorporated into numerous laws, most recently the Digital Service Act and the Digital Market Act that deals with, let's say, all the participants of social media, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and so on. These, and many more. However, what exactly constitutes disinformation and hate speech has never been clarified in all these committee meetings. Over and over again, I asked the chair or the many experts who were invited to give their opinion, what exactly is the definition for hate speech? What exactly is disinformation? As a former journalist, I know that disinformation is very often becomes clear a few years later, and hate speech, what one person considers hate speech is, freedom of expression for the other person. So, and no one could answer this question, no one. They always said, that is difficult, but it depends on the context. Nonsense, it depends on the context, nonsense. No, the real answer is they didn't want to give an answer. They wanted to have a very broad non-definition that can be used against everything and everyone. And that's exactly what they have now implemented into many laws. And this is now, this now affects, let's say, TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And already in the UN Migration Pact that was signed in Marrakesh in 2019, the signature states were asked to make sure that to put into their domestic legal system that migration cannot be criticized. That is explicitly said in the UN Migration Pact that several countries, including Germany, Merkel, signed in 2019. And this is exactly what they now want to do on a much broader basis for not only for migration, but also for LGBTIQ, for gender, for Green Deal, for the EU itself, of course. If you criticize the EU, that shouldn't be allowed. And of course, as always, as invented actually by the former German Minister of Justice, a Social Democrat, Heiko Maas, he put a law into power that somehow changes the responsibilities. It is not the state that is canceling you or canceling your opinion, but they have now transferred this duty or this job to Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and if they don't cancel these opinions, these so-called hate speech, then they are subject to enormous fines, 50 million and so. So what will they do? Of course, they will check everything that is, and with artificial intelligence, this is done within seconds, and they now will filter everything, and probably they will pretend that you have posted your tweet and you can see it on your Twitter account, but actually it will never appear anywhere. And that is exactly what the EU is now aiming at. And so social media is dead. Social media is dead. And that is clearly the intention of the EU. So, and that is not only applies to social media, because all papers, what is what's the Aftenbladet, or what is the biggest Danish paper? Sorry? That is. Because all papers today have websites, so if they publish, if there's disinformation or hate speech on these websites, they are subject to severe fines that actually jeopardizes their very existence, also. So what will the papers do? They will censor their own opinions, because they don't want to get into troubles. And of course, this always is, if you want to fight this, you need a lot of means to pay the lawyers and so on. And the EU has unlimited means. And same goes for Facebook and Twitter and all these. So if you want to fight the EU or the sanctions, you are David against Goliath. And so, that is, so what we have now already in Germany will probably before long. We are not talking about in 20 years' time or in 10 years' time. It's now. And this will also affect the freedom of expression in Denmark. So, it will not only affect freedom of expression. In the end, it's the end of journalism. If you can't write freely, what you think fit, then journalism comes to an end. And so you can all cancel your subscriptions, because if the papers have to fear that they are or especially if the owners of the papers have to fear that they are personally responsible and might shell out damages in the millions, then you know what they will do. But when journalism comes to an end, democracy will come to an end as well. I don't know whether you know the Federalist Papers. These are one of the intellectual founding papers of the United States of America. They were, let's say, part of a very intellectual, very brilliant discussion of the American Constitution before the Constitution was put into power, and there were two camps that were exchanging arguments, and the Federalist Papers were one of, where let's say the publishing forum of one of those, and they prevailed in the end. And the Federalist Papers were published in end of the 18th century, 90 something or so, or earlier, 70, 60 or something, 70 probably. And although this was before the time of mass communication started. Thank you. Mass communication started. They knew exactly that in a country, if you want to have everyone to participate in democracy, you need to have journalism, and so only in the state of Athens, in 500 before Christ, people, the citizens who were able to vote, met between 150 and 170 days per year. So every second day they met and discussed the public affairs. Of course, in a bigger state, you can't do this, and that is the reason why journalism is so important. If you want to have people who can talk about politics, you need to have journalism. Otherwise, democracy comes to an end. And if you don't have journalism, democracy, and if you don't have a journalism that is willing to be truthful and has a love for truth, then democracy comes also to an end. Hannah Arendt, the great Jewish German philosopher, once said something what I quoted so often and reminded my colleagues often of. She said, untruthful journalism is not only, let's say, a problem of professionality or so. It's also a constitutional problem, because if you distort the facts, that make the readers and therefore the voters, that deprives them of their right to take the right political decision. So bad journalism or untruthful journalism is not only bad journalism, it is, according to Hannah Arendt, an attack of democracy itself. And this attack on democracy itself is at the moment carried out by the EU by these two laws they have just put in power. And unfortunately, too many citizens, especially journalists, have failed to notice. And many politicians have failed to notice either. 2 years ago, and now I'm really coming to the end, I spoke to the chairwoman of the Rule of Law Monitoring Group. It's another useless committee. It's called DRFMG, Democracy, Rule of Law, the Lutz Fundamental Rights Monitoring Group. I always called it TTUMG, the totally useless monitoring group, because they always failed what they were really up to do. And I spoke to her about the situation in Germany, and said, hey, we really have a lot of problems that not only not only relates to the non-existent freedom of speech, but to many other things, to the politicizing of our prosecutors, of the judges, and so on and so on. And I gave her, this was a really big. It was not only a few pages, but it was a real big file of all kinds of examples and opinions by former judges of the Constitutional Court and top lawyers and so on and so on. And in the end, she flicked through it. I had sent it to her 5 weeks before we met, and she hadn't read a single page. And then while we talked, she flicked through it and said, yeah, quite interesting. And then she closed the folder and looked at me and said, now, come on, Mr. Fest, let's talk business here. Do you seriously mean that the Federal Republic of Germany is on the brink of becoming a totalitarian state where the rule of law is not longer existent? We all know that no country, is fighting right-wing extremism, more ardently than the Federal Republic of Germany. And now we don't have, a Christian democratic government, but we have a government of the Greens, of the Social Democrats, and of the Liberals. And she's a liberal herself. So, do you really think I should open an investigation on Germany, even if I have all the proofs here in the world? I wouldn't do that. It is simply impossible that Germany, turns into some totalitarian state. I don't believe that. And I could actually understand her. Yeah, it's hard to swallow, I know. And from a leftist liberal point of view, it's clearly understandable. If you do something against right-wing extremism, you are on the good side. As simple as that. And no further questions are asked. But if you must always remember this famous wording by Ignatius Silone, who once said, if fascism comes back, it won't say, I'm fascism. It will say, I'm anti-fascism. And that's exactly what we see today. And the truly deplorable state of the freedom of speech, in Germany gives you probably a hint what to expect from your most southern neighbor, but also what to expect in Denmark if the legislation that is now ready to infiltrate this country as well, the EU legislation, when this comes into power, you can say goodbye to freedom of speech. And then probably you might look for some place to go outside this country as well. Thank you very much.